본 컨퍼런스는 한국 NPO 공동회의, 국제기부문화선진화 포럼, 보건복지부가 공동 주최하고 행정자치부, 한국비영리학회, 한국공인회계사회 후원으로 진행되고 있습니다. 안녕하세요. 저는 2015 국제기부문화선진화 컨퍼런스 오후 섹션 사회를 맡게 된 대한적 십자사 경기도지사 임군빈입니다. 인사드리겠습니다. 오전 개막식 기조 강연에 이어 오후에는 NPO 역량 강화라는 큰 주제 아래 두 가지 주제별 강연이 준비되어 있습니다. 오전 기조 강연은 영국, 미국, 한국의 기부 관련 법제도 정책 현황에 대한 내용이었다면 오후 섹션에는 NPO 단체 실무자분들과 리더들에게 도움이 될 수 있는 실질적인 내용들입니다. 끝까지 함께 하셔서 NPO 단체에서 오신 많은 분들이 도움을 받으시길 바랍니다. 첫 번째 강연은 국제 펀드레이징의 최근 동향, 나라별 모금 성공 사례, 펀드레이징의 철학적 가치 등 다양한 내용으로 데릴 업살 대표님께서 강의해 주시겠습니다. NPO에서 모금하는 사람들은 새로운 것들을 고민하고 전략을 짜고 개인 후원자 개발과 기업과의 연계 캠페인 등을 기획하면서도 사회 변화에 민감하게 반응해야 하고 때론 통찰력과 분석력도 요구를 합니다. 데릴 업살 대표님은 전 세계 62개국 내 230개 이상의 비영리 기관을 대상으로 32년간 모금 마케팅 컨설팅을 진행해 오셨습니다. 대표님의 경험과 지식들이 저희에게 많은 도전과 영감을 주실 것을 기대해 봅니다. 데릴 업살 대표님을 큰 박수와 함께 모시겠습니다.
안녕하세요. Good afternoon. Where are we looking this side now? So, thank you very much for inviting me to this important conference. We have a long session now. 2 hours. Oh, that's very loud. And this is more or less the agenda we're going to go through. A little bit about myself. What do we mean by donors? What are the trends? How are people recruiting donors, including here in Korea? And more importantly, how do we keep those donors and develop them for their lifetime? So this is very much a session about fundraising, but I hope it's interesting to all of you, whether you are fundraisers, CEOs, or whatever, because in reality, in the world of non-profit, we are all fundraisers. So, as was mentioned earlier, I've spent some 32 years working in non-profits. I've worked in about 50 countries, and I spend a lot of my time going around the world speaking at conferences like this. You may have heard of the organization I used to work for, one of them, Greenpeace. And during that time, we raised approximately $1 billion of money, and we opened up operations in many countries around the world. And nowadays I run a company out of Madrid, but we do fundraising and fundraising leadership and strategy for pretty much most of the major international United Nations brands, the Red Cross, and the international non-profits. So when we're talking about fundraising trends in this session and innovations, very much this will be about what's happening around the world across different organizations. Occasionally I may refer to Korea. I'd also like you to have the opportunity to ask questions, not just at the end, so I will be prompting time for quick questions. Quick questions, and I'll try to give a quick answer if that's possible. So yes, I'm a professional fundraiser, and I became a professional fundraiser in 1983 because I truly wanted to change the world. There were many wars going on. As a consequence of war, there were many people in hunger and poverty. And I am a fundraiser all the way through to my bones because I truly want to change the world. And I think NPOs, like yours, are the objects and machines for making the change. But we do need the money to make that change, as we heard in the earlier presentation. So the company I work for and own does all of those things, and we won't explain them. But what do we mean by donors in this presentation? One of the big challenges when you work in the world of non-profits is each country and each organization has different words for the same thing. So in this context, I do not mean government donors. I don't really mean corporate donors. I mean individuals, people like you in the room. And I'm going to ask a question now. How many of you here donate to one charity at least? How many donate to 5 charities? How many donate to more than 5? You're a pretty generous bunch, and you are probably over-representative in terms of donors in Korea. But if I was to be speaking in a conference in Holland, for example, which I did only 2 weeks ago, in Dutch society, the average Dutch person gives to 5 non-profits. Admittedly, they don't give a great deal, but they give every single month, through their bank, a donation to around 5 non-profits. In Spain, people typically give to 3, but a relatively low percentage of the population still give. So what I'm going to be talking about in this presentation is private individuals, not really those people who put cash into a tin or who give a one-off single donation, but people who've committed to make a regular gift. Now, they may come through having given one-off gift to an emergency or a special appeal or a crisis, but the idea is to make them friends for life, as my friend Ken Burnett would say, and to make them regular monthly. And it's to pay through the automatic banking system. Now, the good thing about this market where you are working is you have a highly sophisticated banking system, although not one ATM would give me any cash last night. That was worrying. But you have a very sophisticated banking system, and you're in a country where people give very much automatically through the bank. As our colleagues, guest speakers from the United States will testify, in a super mature market like the United States, this is not typical. And it means they have to work harder to keep getting the single gift checks paid each month. So you already have a technological advantage in this market. In fact, you have many technological advantages for fundraising over many others. Now, just to give you a little bit of context, because I'm looking around the room and I'm almost the oldest person here, and I suspect the average age is 30 at most. A few of us help balance that age numbers. But let's just see what was happening in fundraising in the 1980s in some of the mature markets. Run video, please. Children in Need was the first telethon that was for children in the UK. 1981, the first person with AIDS. I was the first fundraiser in Europe, raising funds for AIDS. Okay, stop VCR, thank you. What was happening in that period? Direct mail was the tool. That was how you got your donations. That is still the primary tool in some mature markets like the United States, Canada, Germany, Austria a little bit, some of the other Nordics. How many of you in organizations send out direct mail, appeals through the post to your donors? I guess like my son, who's even younger than you, wouldn't even open an envelope that was asking for money. But direct mail was king, adverts in newspapers. The use of the telephone to call your donors was just crossing the Atlantic into Europe. And this big concert, which most of you probably weren't born for, but it was a response to the famine in Africa called Live Aid, with big live concerts in the United States and in Europe, galvanized a global public for the first time around a television appeal with the world's most famous rock and pop bands. Probably many of you, if you like Queen, have still seen that incredible performance of Freddie Mercury to a global audience, which was truly mesmerizing. But because that was broadcast for free around the world, and it was an appeal for money, suddenly people got the message. People need your help. Just pick up the telephone and donate. If you ever see the real version, Bob Geldof's language was a little different, a little hard. But what else was happening? Social change movements were beginning to fundraise professionally. And by social change, I mean organizations dealing with homelessness, People like Amnesty were growing, Greenpeace were growing. They were getting into those issues a bit like we were hearing at the end of the last presentation. It's not just the typical services. Suddenly, in some parts of the world, there was a recognition, there was an underculture, parts of our society that weren't being reached, whether that was drug addiction or the beginning of AIDS. And this is interesting. Fundraising was becoming a profession. Now, my company's done 4 studies of the Korean market over the last 4 years, 3 years. And still I know for you who are here as fundraisers, you probably have to explain every day to somebody, whether it's a friend or family, what does fundraiser mean? Even for myself in the 1980s, my own family didn't really understand that actually I was raising money for causes and being paid, albeit very little. So what was going on in the 1990s? Run VR, please.
Touch this.
Well, one of my proudest moments was raising money for Nelson Mandela. I actually had the opportunity to work for him in this election campaign. Groups like REM, who you're hearing now, are getting very engaged in social causes such as Greenpeace. And of course, between the 80s and the 1990s, much was changing in South Korea, so this was your period of social change as well. Ben Burnett, the inventor of relationship fundraising. Thank you. So direct mail was working but stopping. Internet was beginning, believe it or not. At Greenpeace, I was raising $50,000 every single month off the website of Greenpeace, www.greenpeace.org. Guess why? Because we were the only non-profit in the world on internet. There was no competition. There was no Google. We were occasionally the world's #1 or #2 website visited in any given week. President Al Gore of the USA went online more or less the same time as us. Things were changing. HIV/AIDS was coming. And I refer to this, Ken Burnett, already, but relationship fundraising, which comes from a phrase from the corporate sector, relationship marketing, was coined by Ken Burnett. It was the title of the biggest selling fundraising book in history. And suddenly we changed the way we thought about our donors from being, give me the money, we're the solution. Give me the money, we're the solution. I'll send you an appeal, give me the money. Into thinking, maybe this is a conversation. Maybe what we should really do is enter a relationship. And even that book today is iconic in fundraising terms. And there was a recognition that suddenly this monthly giving thing of people paying every month and not by check necessarily was the future. Because if somebody is in a relationship, to coin the name of the next book that Ken Burnett wrote, they can become friends for life. Now, we heard earlier that in Korea, you have a very, very low level of giving through legacies and bequests. Now, if people have traveled a journey of 20, 30 years donating with you, their one last wish, hopefully written down and legalized long before, is to leave some portion of the money they've accumulated in their lifetime to the cause they're passionate about. And as I explained at the lunch we had today, some of us, if that's culturally not the case now, I can assure you from the experience of Spain, we can make that part of your culture. Because people want to give, very often they don't even know they can leave a charitable bequest, or they can do it without harming their family. So legacy and planned giving starts to spread beyond North America and the historical markets of the UK. Ever seen anybody signing up on the street? Well, face-to-face fundraising was invented by Greenpeace in Austria, and as you well know now, you see them everywhere here in Korea, and it's truly the biggest global fundraising tool. It just began. And the mega foundations and the mega donors started coming out. Ted Turner put a challenge to other multimillionaires in the US as he got his wealth statement on an airplane, and he challenged the super rich, the Bill Gates of this world, and others to become philanthropic like him. And as many of you will know, the Melissa and Bill Gates Foundation is one of the most powerful and rich and generous foundations in the world. So this century, Have you noticed how the televisions change? Anybody old enough to remember those boxes? Now we're all flat screens. In fact, where I live, they're nearly all Samsung. Run VR, please. Well, we never did have the millennials then. But suddenly, everybody started getting online. People were using MSN Messenger, they were getting email accounts, they were getting computers with access to the internet. Apple was becoming a ubiquitous brand. And there were global targets set for us to achieve collectively in the Millennium Goals to end poverty and disease in much of the world. As some countries in Europe, we all changed our currency, apart from the British, into the euro. Stop the NR, please. Yeah. So what happened? What happened suddenly in this last beginning of the 21st century? Online giving started happening, places that allowed people to do what they've always done in many cases, which was run a marathon, do a sporting event, do something collectively as a team. The English have a sense of humour which is somewhat strange, so they will do things like sit in a bath of food and people will pay them to do that for a good cause. Or they will dress up with a big nose for the whole day at work and dress their cars in the same way. But the online giving portals changed collecting money and cash on paper to building your own fundraising community online. Things like Just Giving came up and others. And what was starting to happen is going from, it was just as the image before was the NPO at the center. Well, in reality, if you look deeper into that, most non-profit organizations in the world, the vast majority across every single market, are funded by donors like you or me. If anybody tries to convince you that the future is corporate giving, it is not. It has not changed from 5% of income from non-profits as a sector in any country over the last 20, 30 years. Indeed, as a percentage of giving, it's going down. Foundations rarely manage to get up to the 5% point. The vast majority of private sector income for non-profits is from ordinary citizens. And suddenly we need to put the donor at the center. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is not just recruiting those donors, but making them king and queen, listening to them and not just asking for money from them, engaging them, not just seeking financial support. And with all of this technology that's been coming through, relational databases that allow you to interrelate what your donors have done at high school or university with other people who've come through the same background. To give you an idea, in the early 2005, 2006, at a conference in Holland, we were talking about some databases and things. Oxfam in the UK, at that point the largest charity, had 21 relationships with its donors, all held on different databases. So if I bought an Oxfam t-shirt, you had no idea that I volunteered in a shop, or that I gave a donation, or that I'd left a bequest in my will, because they were all on 21 different databases. You never saw the full picture of the donor. And when that got presented at a conference in Holland, somebody from Amnesty put their hands up and said, that's good, we only have 38 databases, each separate, where the same donor may be repeated. Suddenly the technology was coming together, suddenly we could see the full picture, and suddenly we could interrelate, not just fundraising, but advocacy. Is anybody here a member of Amnesty? Anybody? Or Greenpeace? Amnesty, Greenpeace, there's a few people here. Those organizations don't just ask you for money. They ask you to sign a petition. They ask you to take an action. They ask you to write a letter on behalf of an imprisoned prisoner in a jail in some far-flung land, or they might ask you to do something to stop Japanese whaling. But the relationship is not purely financial. Suddenly, we could see the whole, and guess what we started to discover? The engaged donor was worth much more to an organization than a donor that was only asked for money. If I do something for an organization apart from send money each month, I must be more committed, I'm more engaged, I'm more interested. So what's happening? Some organizations, I started fundraising mostly selling t-shirts and mostly organizing pop concerts, very large pop concerts, lots of fun. I have a collection of t-shirts that is so big my wife keeps asking me to donate it to a charity. Not that they would want t-shirts from the 1980s. But suddenly, things were changing again. If you wanted to go give a gift, you went online and gave a virtual gift. You didn't necessarily buy a piece of jewelry made in the Amazon or something. You bought exciting things like buying a toilet. Because what stops young women from going to school in many parts of Africa and Asia, included in some of the poorer parts of India, is hygiene. And if they can't go to a bathroom and be clean, they're too embarrassed to go to school, so they drop out of school. And what's the long-term impact of that? It's taking women out of the workforce, it's taking women out of productive life, and it's isolating them. Biggest cause of not going to school in Africa as well is dysentery, and sickness is related to lack of hygiene. So buying a virtual toilet through internet so a charity like WaterAid can install it is all part of making a difference. It's no longer about me. Again, I don't need the t-shirt. Somebody needs that restroom better than I do. And then there are other projects, and Barbara and me here at the front were talking a little bit about this morning, things like Kiva. Does anybody here know what Kiva is? Yes, lady there? Kiva is a platform, again online, where you can go and choose which project you want to support in which part of the world, with which part of money, and in a sense it's not important if there is a Save the Children or UNICEF or somebody else. Again, the donor is put in control. And this message is going to go through this presentation because I think every time you're thinking of your donors, think about what you can do to make them more part of your organization. Otherwise, they'll drift away. They have plenty of choice. And over the last few years, last 10 years, you've had many, many other organizations emerge in Korea, and you've had many come to the market. So now it's a bit like shopping for a product. If your organization isn't giving the best service, if you haven't got the best interface, if you haven't got the best way of communicating, somebody will go to a better charity, or a charity non-profit does it better than you. And I can assure you fundraising is truly global. We've evaluated the fundraising in Mongolia. We fundraise ourselves in Peru through face-to-face. There is almost no part on this planet that is not touched by fundraising and philanthropy. And you're in a fantastic situation in a market like this because you don't have to make the mistakes we all made. You can take the learnings and you can adopt and adapt and innovate. And you are. You already are innovating in fundraising in Korea, by the way, which gets presented back at conferences like the one in Holland last week. And fundraisers from 65 countries were learning about what you are doing in Korea. In this case, largely through UNICEF, who was my co-presenter at that conference. So again, the Ice Bucket Challenge. Anybody here do the Ice Bucket Challenge? You're throwing a bucket of ice over your head. Yes, this is a very active corner of the room. Either you've all got tired arms, or this is just where all the activists sit. But again, it's a silly idea. It was a particular disease, and you threw a bucket of ice over it. But it went from Obama to, I think, the Dalai Lama, and almost everybody else did it. And again, it was social action from the public. There was a charity behind it, although that kind of got lost in the message sometimes. It was about people taking control. Crowdfunding. Is crowdfunding working in Korea? Anybody put their hands up and say, we're doing great success with crowdfunding? No. And you know what? I got a message from one of the many feeds I get from fundraising magazines around the world and blogs. And the headline yesterday that I received in my hotel room was, crowdfunding, it has failed to deliver. It's failed to deliver yet, I would say. Somebody hasn't got it right. There are many platforms, but I think people do want to take group action. Maybe we just haven't got the message or the tools right yet. How about that? When I was at Greenpeace, we had the best TV production of any non-profit in the world. We had satellites. And if we didn't have satellites, we used everybody else's satellite and bounced images. We had cameras that could film at sea and in war zones. The BBC used to hire them from us, and because they had no technology big enough, powerful enough to film from some of the most dangerous war zones. Now, everybody's cell phone in this room can do pretty much what a $500,000 camera and digital suitcase could do 15, 20 years ago. There is no excuse whatsoever from not showing video content to your donors, your potential donors, and making your own YouTube channel, or giving people the option to see it through other mechanisms, whether it's Vivo or whatever, because people want to see real images. I'm a very strong supporter of Médicos Sin Fronteras, Médicos del Mundo, what are they called in English? Doctors of the Board, Doctors Without Borders. One of the amazing things they do is they just put somebody in the worst situation of Ebola on a iPad or equivalent, and they run a Skype telephone conference with donors around the world. It costs them virtually nothing, but I can ask a very brave doctor in a very dangerous situation how they're doing, what's working, what's not working, and they will answer you just using Skype and a tablet or a cell phone. So if CNN can do it, if MSF can do it, think of those technologies, whether you're working in social welfare, whether you're working in the welfare of animals or whatever causes. Let people hear firsthand from those people delivering the services. People no longer want, especially your generation, because you're mostly of that digital generation, they want to hear firsthand. They don't want it rewritten by a copywriter that sounds insincere. No, she didn't say that. That was the copywriter thinking she might have said that. Let's hear it from the beneficiary. Let's hear it from the service provider. Well, I grabbed some water. Are there any questions? And you may need to go to a microphone, but any burning questions so far? Let's move on then. Is it clear? Is it being translated okay? Okay, let's move on. Last week I was in Kansas City wearing chef's clothes with a hat and presenting a recipe for fundraising success as a chef. So at least I'm wearing relatively normal clothes this week. So what's happening today? These are the key tools, and you know what? All of those are currently being used in Korea. And in fact, some of those, for example, your digital and social media, text and DRTV and face-to-face are being used more than in many other markets. Those are the tools being used in the most sophisticated markets. You're using them. What I'm not convinced from the studies that we've seen is you're not fully integrating them. So when you recruit somebody here in Korea through face-to-face, it's not clear that you're always sending a text message afterwards to confirm and thank. You're certainly not using the telephone in the same ways as some of the other markets where you would actually call them to thank again, verify, check that the payment method is right, do quality control on the donor, the recruiter who recruited the donor, and I know you're not 4 months later calling donors to say, are we doing okay? Are you happy with us? And all of those are how you integrate face-to-face, SMS, and email thank you could be added. And even on social media, you should be having postings from your fundraisers so people can say, hey, these are real fundraisers for my cause on the street or on the shopping mall. So let's look at face-to-face fundraising. There'll be lots of images of this, and I'll skip through them. From humble beginnings in Austria in 1997, and you can look up how it started on a website called SOFI, SOFII.org. This is where face-to-face is happening today. If I was to impose any other fundraising tool over that, half the world would at least disappear. And we're talking about people on the street, at doors, shopping malls. These are all different words. When I said each organization has a language, it might be called dialoguing. Why is it? Well, a dialogue is a conversation, but it happens to be the name of the company that first invented what's happening there? I didn't do that. First invented the tool in Austria. These are the people. You may have a different name for it. In the United Kingdom, and beginning, I know, in Korea, there's starting to be some criticism of too much face-to-face on the street. The journalist came up with the word chuggers. It means charity muggers, people who rob you on the street, which is not a nice name. My colleague at UNICEF calls them changels, like angels for change. I prefer changels to chuggers. It works for everybody. Is anybody here using face-to-face? Just so I can get a show of hands in your organisation. Activist Corner definitely here. Anybody else? Incredibly unusual. Which organisation's yours? Which organisation? Sorry? Oh, okay, that's one I hadn't heard of. It's very big in Korea, so I'm surprised how few hands went up this time. It works for everybody. Yes, child sponsorship is easy. Do you need to have a famous name? No. Do you need to have a compelling cause? Yes. So you may be the most unknown cancer charity in Korea, but people want to end cancer. If you're working in child cancer and you're asking people if they want to play a role in finding a cure for childhood cancer, it's hard for people to say no. You don't have to be as famous as the American Cancer Society or whatever. You just have to be expressing the cause well. And it works for many, many organizations. And what's interesting is it works everywhere. Everywhere you can have a conversation. Because the first fundraising in the world didn't start with a direct mail piece with a free set of stickers and a pen. No, it started with somebody asking somebody for some help. And guess what? That still works. Asking somebody else to help you, to help others, to help a cause, to help solve a problem. The giraffe in the middle is not in Africa. This is in southeast England, and it's an organization that breeds rare endangered species and returns them to the wild. And they have their fundraisers dressed in safari suits, and they're very knowledgeable about the animals. Very compelling to say, and we're a charity, and we need money to help this thing. Door to door, I won't go into the detail because you have this printed out in front of you, both in English and Korean. But going to the door, yes, you can choose neighborhoods. You can choose to go to places where there is a higher population of people with middle incomes. You may have challenges in a city like Seoul because you have so many tower blocks compared to in a smaller city where you may have more open space and access to buildings. But it works. The challenges, yes, you can't get to some areas, gated communities don't work, etc. Private sites. How many of you here have a partnership with a corporation? Anybody? A few of you, okay. Those corporations, whether it's one of these, whether it's Google, or whether it's just in a shopping mall that is owned by somebody, or it's an airport, and airports are very often owned by private organizations, is if they've already got a relationship with you, say you have a relationship with Samsung, then, and they're already donating money, they're doing maybe some cause-related marketing with you, they have thousands of employees. Those employees, many of them, are in offices. Guess what? If they're in an office, they have employment usually. If they have employment, they have income, and therefore are much more likely to be able to financially support you than maybe picking people random in the street. Now, that's probably not such an issue with 4% unemployment or 5% unemployment. I can assure you in a country where I live with 40% youth unemployment and 25% general unemployment, stopping people or asking people in the street in employment is an important issue. So you can segment, I've always found it strange. The best place in the world for face-to-face to work, universally, seems to be airports. Now I live in airports, and I'm an advocate of face-to-face. I'm either too late for my plane, or at least I'm going to do something else in the airport. But people have time, and they have disposable income. It has some challenges of costs. So what you're looking for is different sites. So today, I think, is National Meat Day today? Is that correct? Certainly in the big square in front of the City Hall, there's big exhibitions to celebrate the meat of Korea. But there will be lots of people in that area this evening maybe. There's concentrations of people around sporting events. There are concentrations of people in shopping malls and so forth. It's actually making sure you take the face-to-face where the people are. And also making it look different. This is UNHCR in Thailand. You know, we went from just people on the street with a clipboard to a more designed background, but as you'll see, it gets more and more different. You don't necessarily always have to be starting with a monthly gift. You may start with engaging people through a gift catalogue, be that virtual or real, and then getting them into a conversation about monthly giving. These are images largely, I think, from the USA and Canada. But again, Save the Children in South Africa, Save the Children in Korea. Same organizations, has a similar look, though it would have been trained by the same people probably, but nevertheless it's working in these markets. So this is an organization that was going for microloans, so it wasn't actually, the engagement tool was, would you like to build a fund of microloans so we can help women establish small businesses and become self-sufficient, support their family, and then they will return the loan to us. Now, that space in the middle, that cube with all the light in, that is just UNICEF Brazil space for face-to-face fundraising in a shopping mall. They have built that space. So you can see how it's gone from clipboard, that guy at the door, to these engaged and enlightened spaces where things happen. And people get excited and they get the message and they hear about other cultures, they hear about other needs, and they can do things. And again, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big challenges in this very busy world we're in is how do we make our organization, our activities more real, people to touch and feel us. We're no longer just a virtual image. One of the disappointments, I would say, of the digital world is most charity websites, and I may include yours, and I may include my own, are very, very boring. People do not spend more than seconds on certain pages of charity websites before they skip to the next. And very often the one they're going to spend time on is not going to be the donation page. And even when they do, mostly the case for support, the argument, the emotional pull that that page for donations has is like wearing a wet cloth over my head. It's dull, dull, dull. It says how much you can give, ask me for lots of data, and then maybe press a button, then it doesn't work because you didn't enter the right number, and away you go. You're fed up. Whereas in a conversation with a fundraiser, you have plenty of time to get engaged. This is a little girl from Sao Paulo, and in the end she said to her mum, can you please help those children? So even the children are part of the emotional push and pull of the appeal. They become your advocates. Again, any questions? It's really just an excuse to drink water. Okay, let's move on. There might be too much face-to-face, and there is negativism, and as I mentioned, and certainly Korea has been affected by some of that, the press, but you have to be very, very clear. Again, any organization using this tool, what is important is on your your website, make it transparent. We've heard how transparency is so important. There's the Giving Korea Study 2014, which my team have studied extensively. Transparency comes up time and again. It's one of the lack of transparency is the biggest barrier for giving, or one of in this country. And if they see people on the street and it's got your logo attached, they might not think this is real. Maybe they think it's a fraud or a cheat. Well, they can go on their phone and quickly look it up, and guess what? That information is there, and it will say, our fundraisers today are in XYZ shopping mall. Or today is a special day, we're raising funds for a particular emergency in Nepal. And you'll see our fundraisers on the street. So many organizations just simply forget to do that. In Hong Kong, the non-profits came together, as they've done in the UK, as they've done in Ireland, as they've done in Holland. and created an alliance that says we collectively, and you may not see the logos there, we collectively support this form of fundraising, and there is our code of ethics. So in many countries, these are the alliances, going forward or backwards? Too far, I think. The alliances that organizations have formed to make a collective face and to deal with public criticism. So quite often I'm traveling and I could be anywhere. I remember I was getting out the shower in Washington 2 years ago, and I was asked from the PFRA from the UK if I would be willing to go on and do an interview live with the BBC World Service to counter the issue of public criticism of face-to-face. So my wife did make sure I had a towel while I was being interviewed. I said, you innovate in Korea. How many of you saw the fundraising robot? This is not an invention. This was actually a fundraising robot that was in one of the shopping malls here in Korea for Save the Children. The only problem was, as far as we know, it hadn't got the script of signing up for monthly donations, but certainly you couldn't miss it as a fundraising tool. And engage people. Why is that young girl trying to lift a big thing full of water? It's because that's the kind of weight a girl her age has to carry every single day, probably 3 or 4 kilometers to the nearest almost clean water supply. And when you ask your little girl to lift it and she hardly can do it, and they realize that a girl in Africa probably has to do that or balance it on her head. My colleague from UNICEF 2 weeks ago was showing me 2 dolls, like children's dolls. And those dolls, one weighed the normal weight of a 9-month child, and the other weighed the typical malnourished weight of a child they're dealing with in some of the worst affected areas by famine. The contrast is enormous. And if you tried saying the difference between X kilos and Y kilos, what does that mean? But when you feel the difference, you start to have an emotional engagement with that person who you're asking to support your work. Charity in England, they work in saving the bees. Bees are essential for the future of our planet. There is a saying, I think, when we no longer have bees, there'll no longer be humans, because they are so important in the spreading of the seeds and so forth to propagate plant life. But that's a more stunning close than some. This is, I think, a cancer charity. I can't see the logo from now. Their fundraisers look like cancer doctors. At least suddenly they stand out a little bit from the crowd in the street. And this is the biggest cancer charity in the UK. Again, on the back it says cancer kills. So cancer research has its fundraisers doing this. To give you an idea of legacy and bequest income, cancer research make close on $1 billion every single year purely from bequests. I'll repeat that, almost $1 billion. It's about 800 million UK pounds, thereabouts, from bequests. It's taken them many years to build up a supporter base to do that. But I tell you, the rewards are enormous. Now the bees again. Why the bees need you? Friends of the earth. The thing, and again, you're in a market in a country where technology is very high, but again, we've moved from paper to an iPad or a similar type of machine, where you can just put the data in, it verifies the data. You don't have to then go back and process it, send it to the bank. Now the first gift, when somebody is signed up on the street, can be debited straight away from their bank or their credit card. There is already that person who's signed on the street through one of these tools is your donor. They are not still a donor waiting to make a gift. And with the iPads, you can make a message. So interestingly, they discovered if you put sound on these machines, it's a complete waste of time because the environments are too noisy. So then you have to think of your organization simply in images and words, big messages, powerful, compelling images, but without the voice. But it can give you, for example, some organizations will say, Take Worldwide Fund for Nature. Oh, I'm not interested in panda bears, but I am very keen on saving the llama. And you go ding ding, and suddenly the story of the llama comes up on the screen, and you address the issue that the particular person you're having a conversation with is interested in. Oxfam using the same in Australia. We go through that, data validation. Anybody here a gamer? Gamer online? Does anybody play with virtual reality? Anybody yet seen virtual reality? Well, virtual reality is one of the biggest growing sort of future trends. Virtual reality, when you put a headset, and here we go, you can see the future. And those of us who are old enough used to have these little things, yes, where you just slide them around and you see images, like little slides illuminated of, famous tourist sites usually. It's now very different, and in fact, again, mostly manufactured in this country. What do you need? You need some kit. Some of this kit is incredibly cheap. And what can you do? So UNICEF, and I did it myself 2 weeks ago, and I nearly got dizzy, is you go inside a refugee camp and you spend 5 minutes with this young girl, Zatari, she's in the Zatari camp, but with this girl, and really it's her life. Even when she's playing football with the girls, you dodge out of the way of the ball because it's going to hit you. But the story that she tells in her voice, and you are standing looking around at the vast refugee camp, was more compelling. I mean, they even have to have things because people cry very often when they're watching these stories. It is very compelling. That's her starting her story in her home. So I think, do we have Run VNR on this one, or is it the next one? Technology. Is it this or the next? No. I'm out of control. Good time for questions. Anybody seen the use of virtual reality? I know UNICEF is trialing it here in Korea, so. Is it this slide or the next? Oh, here we go. You can dance.
Brings the picture or the situation really close to the west side of the world.
Great experience, but I think it's too hard to see how the people suffer and how we think we suffer, but we don't.
It was kind of like getting off a plane, being there for 8 minutes, and then getting out of there.
Once you see the video, it really makes you think
Thank you very much. That runs for a bit longer, but in the interest of time we won't. It significantly, and the data comes up next, significantly increased the number of people signing up. 16% lift in the number of people signing up to become a monthly donor. This was for Amnesty, but the same figures are being experienced when they do it as for UNICEF. It's a very powerful tool. And again, something that if you're walking down the street and you see somebody wearing that headset, you stop and you think. In our busy lives, how often do we even stop and think? How often do we see a homeless person on the street and somehow not see them? And yet this allows you to see the charity and take an action. We've watched that one, that's where it was coming. So, let's move on to another form of fundraising. SMS and texting. Has anybody sent an SMS or a text while I've been talking? Anybody? You're not admitting it, are you? Only one person went, ooh. I bet you did. I bet you did something online. I bet somebody sent a message through WhatsApp, or they checked their emails, or they did something. But what's the point I'm trying to make is that this is always with us. This is always with us. It is with us for many of you, I'm sure, even as your alarm in the bedroom, and it's there. It's the only time in history, I think it's fair to say, we've always carried the donation tool itself. This is the best donation tool in the world because you can send a text, that's a donation. You can make a contact with a non-profit, or they can contact you. So what do we mean? Well, if you're going to go for the donors that I'm looking for, by giving a message that says 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, donate 1, and in not 1 here, but $1, €1, £1, typically, that's the beginning of a relationship. This kind of fundraising began in Molise, in Italy, in the early 2000s, the very first country to use SMS for fundraising, and it happened as a response to the earthquakes they had there. And for the first time, people said, send a text to save the children, or the Red Cross. And hundreds of thousands of people, within minutes, were sending it. The news had broadcast it, text this number, the telecoms agreed to collect the money and pass it on to the organization. Nowadays, the objective of generating a text lead, and note the word lead, is yes, that €1, $1, whatever it will be in won, in Korea, has value. But what it's really beginning is somebody has started donating to your organization. Now your job is to turn that one single act, that simple act, into a lifetime relationship. So this was probably one of the first large event types of SMS fundraising that happened in the world. Anybody know where that is? That's the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. It's New Year's Eve, and not surprisingly, like Berlin often is, it's raining on New Year's Eve, but there are hundreds of thousands of people to celebrate. And they usually need 2 or 3 things during those events. They need to know where the restrooms are. They need to know where their lost friends are. And in order to do that, they look at big screens. So all UNICEF did was to say, by the way, on those big digital screens, can you put help a child donate to UNICEF? And it cost them nothing. But they made in one evening, and we're talking several years ago now, nearly $400,000. Cost nothing. In those days, they didn't know how to build a relationship, but UNICEF soon got smarter. And in fact, it's fair to say UNICEF is probably one of the brand leaders in using high-volume SMS. In the US, it peaks during election periods, and certainly Obama's team were fantastic at using SMS in their first and second elections, not least by telling the public who the vice president candidate will be. The other thing is, increasingly, you can sign people up to give every single month through your cell phone. Now, what is the problem of people under the age of 25 when it comes to philanthropy? Well, one thing is, in most countries, they don't have that much money. The other thing, their bank accounts are not exactly reliable in most countries. They tend to run out of money. But the one thing they never let run out of money is their cell phone. And also, most charities ask young people for much more money than they could possibly give in order to make the economics of signing people on the street worthwhile. It's an expensive business, it's not free. So 2 things. One is, this is an example of Oxfam using, again, a simple tool. That bucket has a message on it, but it's exactly the buckets they give to places where the water is not fit for drinking. That's a filter bucket, dirty water in the top, clean water out the bottom. Simple message, simple tool. And it's engaging on the street or in a shopping mall. But what that young woman is doing is she's listening to the message of Oxfam, and she is signing up to make a regular gift through her cell phone. And the transaction will be processed by her cell phone provider. It's not going through PayPal or a credit card or anything like that. So we'll skip through this, but you initiate the process, you do an option, and there's a very high correlation between one gift converting to an RG, regular gift. It's integrated with the call center, so that person will get a thank you SMS back, but in a short space of time they will get a physical caller calling them to thank them and also verifying they really meant to do what they're doing. And in some cases, if they're a slightly older person or they've got the capacity, they will then go on to a normal monthly giving program as well, or at some point later. So it's used even to sign up relatively low level but child sponsors. It's used, these are billboards that appear in various public places. For example, especially ladies' restrooms where they have the 5-point check for breast cancer. But at the same time, there is a means of supporting the breast cancer campaign that's running that campaign. Where does it go? It goes in restrooms, trains, outdoor, because when people are waiting for public transport, you're not going to go online, go to your boring donation page, which is full of rubbish, boring text, but you might make a short little text donation. Christian Aid from the UK, it's used to capture donors while they're sitting on the metro, which is a very long ride in London if you've ever been on the metro to get to work or back from work. And a simple £3 a month, $5 a month donation allows you to save lives through something tangible, through a malaria net. So, and using it as a thank you tool. The king and queen of this type of fundraising is UNICEF in Spain. You may know, anybody here a soccer fan, football? Oh, that's about the most hands that went up, especially at the back amongst the boys. But UNICEF in Spain has a very unique sponsorship. Barcelona Football Club pay them $7 million, or euros in fact, like $9 million, to have the UNICEF logo on their t-shirts. Now normally you pay to have a logo on a sports shirt. It's the other way around with UNICEF and Barcelona. But UNICEF in Spain have spent the last 10 years making sure pretty much every single sporting activity in Spain has an engagement with UNICEF. That doesn't matter whether it's basketball, ice hockey, gymnastics, soccer, you name it, they have spent time and investing time and people time going to meet with sports stars, their representatives, their teams, and saying, will you support UNICEF? One of the main things that these ambassadors do is promote 28028 whenever they can. So whether that's Messi, or whether that's I think the other one behind is the Spanish basketball team. The guy on the top left, he works in the, is it NBA, the National Basketball Association, whatever. These sports people and these posters are everywhere, and people are being asked to donate €1.20, about $1.50. They also get themselves onto chat shows, popular TV shows. Sometimes it involves taking the presenter out to a program, asking them to make a mini clip, and then only in maybe a 2-minute piece on their show, the public are asked through television to go to that donation SMS. The first time they did it, 300,000 SMS came in within 5 minutes. This is all instant reaction. Worth in euros, that's about 380,000 US dollars. And it grows and it grows. Just through SMS in Spain, UNICEF has generated 23 million US dollars at very, very little cost. Because who's doing the promotion? It's other people. It's in the middle of a sporting event. It goes up on the screen. The challenge is to make sure you convert people back and into a monthly donor. It may sound like a simple tool. It's a very powerful tool. And don't just think this is for the largest non-profits. There are organizations on this list, Movimiento por la Paz, Movement for Peace. I think it has 3 staff. It's that small an organization, and it's working for them. So, as they say in India, SMS and be blessed. Ganesh. Questions, comments? Hands up who is using SMS as a fundraising tool here? My gosh, it's a country of opportunity. Digital. Okay, you know that, and in fact we have the statistics for South Korea. You have the highest speed internet connection in the world. You have 62% of the population in this country makes purchases online. And of those, 37% of the whole public uses the cell phone to make purchases. So you have got the tools in your hand. So we should be using them. Again, social media, what most people are thinking social media should be for is raising money. It's better about generating leads. The great thing about lead generation is it's a fairly simple task, whether people are going online to sign a petition, whether they're signing up for a newsletter, whether they're signing up for more information, when they're asking for their breast care information pack, as long as they have ticked a box that allows you to contact them again, you have that opportunity to contact them. And by and large, in every single country we've worked in, the best tool for that is the telephone. Again, which is the tool that is the least used amongst the fundraising toolkit here in Korea. You use the telephone mostly for speaking to your existing donors. You rarely use it in your fundraising mix here. And certainly my team, when we've evaluated the market, see this as one of the kind of missing gaps in the fundraising mix in Korea. Again, using the BIDI codes, which originated in this part of the world, using them on posters to capture the data and using those to direct people to a response site. Scan your donation. There's lots of things. I put these slides in because I know some of you are more in the governance and leadership of organization. There are very good reports around about what you should do if you're in the governance area to understand and know about digital fundraising. Back in the day, many of the board members of organizations, CEOs, said, we can't allow our organization to be discussed online in open chat sites. We can't be on things like Facebook or whatever because we can't control the content. The truth is you can't control the content anyway on any media because people will talk about you. So provide the spaces for people to talk about your organization and monitor it. There are studies, I'm not sure if there's a Korean study yet, about how these are all non-profits, some large, some small, some you'll have never heard of, how they behave online, and they get scored in terms of social effectiveness. There are similar studies in the US and Canada particularly, but this is a figure that was come up about the value to as a donor value to some of the activities online, and we don't probably have time to explain it yet. But I've put these up. This is one from Canada recently, the 2015 Digital Outlook report. You have these images. It's easy to go and Google them and find out what other players are doing in this field. But again, USA and Canada leading NGOs, what are they doing in terms of lead generation strategies in order to generate new donors? Facebook. What was it? 3 weeks ago, was it? Technically a third of the world's population were on Facebook in one day. I mean, a ridiculously high number of the percentage of the population. I may well have been one of them. I was posting on Facebook last night images of Seoul at night, amongst other things. But this hugely popular platform is now enabling online donations. Now, Facebook may not be the lead social media network in your country, but even so, there will be a high percentage of the population there. Are you already getting yourself to be Facebook donation ready? What does that mean? How are you going to respond to those donors if they donate online? What's the backward and forth communication going to be to create a relationship? If LinkedIn created a donation point with professionals only and not idle chat, I would imagine it will be a substantially higher average gift than you'll get off Facebook. But nonetheless, Facebook will be pulling in potentially a whole new generation of philanthropists. And it is happening. I'm sorry it's another UNICEF image. But yes, they use Trick or Treat and Facebook as a fundraising tool. DRTV, an acronym that stands for Direct Response Television. It does not stand for TV adverts for charities. It is not about presenting an image about your work. It is a call to action. DRTV, oops, I have to get that close. DRTV is all about call to action. It's usually short. The long format is pretty much dying only in North America now. And it is show the problem, show what we're doing about the problem as an organization, what can you do to solve the problem as an individual, you the viewer, and how do we say thank you? That's the only 4 things any direct response TV ad for a non-profit has done for some decades. In this country, DRTV accounts for a very large amount of new donor acquisition. But how many, again, in this room are using the television? I think from the statistics we saw, we published internally last week for our client, I think you were the actual highest percentage country in the world for generating DRTV leads as a percentage of your overall mix of new donors. So look at who is doing it here in Korea. I think Good Neighbors, I remember reading, is one of the key players. And see what you can learn from them. It's a powerful tool. I'm not going to go too deep into this. It is, do not get an agency that does branding to do this. Work with DRTV specialists. It's about ask for the money, show the ask for the money, show the need, and show resolution. It's not about having some wordy, lengthy description of your organization. So the 2 I's in fundraising: innovation, inspiration, innovation, not imitation, and irritation. Again, Ken Burnett, fundraising guru. Fundraising innovation is about mixing the tools up, trying something new. Face-to-face was invented in Greenpeace in Austria because my boss said to me, and he was German, "We are grey piece," meaning the color of his hair at the time. I think I was not yet going grey or bald. And we need to be Greenpeace. So we needed to bring in younger donors because even as Greenpeace, our donors around the world were in their 65 and above age group. And face-to-face was created as a way of engaging younger people. It's taking a tool you've seen work for a for-profit and test. And I suspect most of your organizations do not even have a test budget. And a test in fundraising means test and fail, fail again, test. Check why you failed or what element failed, what part didn't work. Edison didn't invent the light bulb by making a light bulb and plugging it in. Oh, it worked. He made thousands of light bulbs that didn't work. It's actually testing and failing, and some moment you'll come through with something that will revolutionize your organization and the fundraising world. So a lot of it is about using the multi-channels together. I've talked about that. It's integrating anything that can integrate, the press to web, driving people through multiple relationships and multiple contacts without annoying or irritating them, as Ken Burnett said. This is a way of looking at the new donor future created by Alfredo Botte and Marcelo Iñara, both ex-Greenpeace, but very much in the innovation side of fundraising. And it's about creating social trisumers. People who are consumers, who are trying things, and they are like trisumers, trying consumers. And it means quite often the donor pyramid can get reversed or people enter at different points. But largely it's through engaging people through some form of activism. Now, by activism, I don't just mean signing a petition for more people to go in a Zodiac and stop Japanese whaling. It might be making a call for more investment in early childhood education. It might be making a call for more investment into research into breast cancer. but it's a call to action. It's asking people to collectively do something as well as individually that can create social change for the cause that you're working with. It may be saying no to cuts in social welfare. It may be anything, but they get in at the entry point of the activists, and usually online, and it's the kind of hidden gate in the pyramid. You know, I've had a cell phone and before that a BlackBerry, but you know, I got up to Samsung this year for many years, and I saw the button NFC, and I had no idea what NFC really meant. Anybody use near-field communication for anything? Strikes me as a kind of lost technology, really, something nobody could find a use for. Except now in the UK, a company called Instant Fundraising Wristbands has these gizmos that enable people to, you know, you can go to a friend, would you like to donate to my favorite cause? And you put the wristband next to their cell phone if it's got NFC on, and it draws them straight into your favorite cause's fundraising page. So there's a great example, and I've kept it out for reasons of time. In Hong Kong, they used NFC on the typical collecting day of cash. And I think the first one to do it was Oxfam, and when they put a sticker on you saying, yes, thank you for your cash donation in the tin, real old-time fundraising, they got the sticker and then asked the donors to scan their phones over the little paper sticker. And it had a little tiny chip inside it, microchip. So small it was free to give away. And that scanned them straight into the donation page. There was a communication between their phone and the supporter base of the organization. Suddenly, not only were they getting new donors, they were getting new people signing up to become street collectors. And now, in fact, in Hong Kong, there's even a coalition of using NFC fundraising tools to accentuate the value of their giving days. Also look at organizations that, you know, I won't tell you the life story of this man, just to say that he had a very crazy younger life. He took a lot of things he should not have drunk, eaten, smoked, and done. But he took one look at the charities dealing with the issue of water in the USA after he'd been through a personal crisis of health and other things, and decided to create a new charity dealing with contaminated water for kids in many parts of the world. And he refused to follow any rule book. I mean, I've met him a couple of times. He's completely crazy, fanatic, enthusiastic, but he suddenly wanted to go straight to that cause, connect people to the cause. They found ways. So just go to their website, charity:water. He separates the charitable work from the fundraising work. The fundraising side is donated largely. But he decided to use every 21st century piece of media, public relations, etc. for his cause, partnered with some pretty impressive brands around the world, and, whoops, where did that come?